Hi guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. So much fallout following the title decider in Abu Dhabi, and it is all going on today at Red Bull Racing. Big rumours emerging immediately after the Grand Prix was over that Gianpiero Lambiase's relationship on the pit wall with Max Verstappen could be coming to an end for personal reasons, but the key drama today is that Helmut Marko might be out of the team entirely, just a few months on from Christian Horner getting the sack, and Max Verstappen saying that if Marko was to go, he would go as well. Now it seems Marko, the chief advisor of Red Bull for 20 years, will be leaving the team as well. Big change at Red Bull. What does it mean for Max? Is Red Bull changing away substantially from the organisation they have been to win all these titles over the last few years? Lots of drama. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Couple of things to start with. Over the weekend, Stefano Domenicali here congratulating the new world champion, was talking about the changes in the calendar going forward, and he made it very clear that from 2027 there will be more sprint races. Now, more races full stop is still unlikely, but there will be more sprints. Domenicali confirmed it. We have 6 this year, we have 6 next year. Likely we will go to 9 or to 12 or something. I don't know about that, but Max Verstappen was asked, look, if you had another race, you could have won this title, and Max said, look, we've already got too many races. I'm happy that the title is now over and I can go to sleep for the winter. Another couple of key things I wanted to mention from yesterday, of course, it was the decider in the desert or whatever they said. Now, Alex Palou is in this negotiation or lawsuit, let's say, with McLaren. There was a big drama there. Not the biggest fan, Alex Palou, of McLaren and Zach Brown. So Palou was pretty clear, please do it, Max. He didn't want McLaren to win. Perez had a generational hate watch this season, it's got to be said, right? Now, Perez, he even said recently to the media he wants Max to win. He thinks Max can do it. So, you know, the comments that Perez made here on social media were no slight at Max, but they were certainly a slight towards Tsunoda, Lawson, Red Bull Racing, Christian Horner, whoever you like, right? So there was this meme that basically, perhaps I treated you too harshly at Sergio Perez after Tsunoda's defense against Lando Norris, which obviously went nowhere. Perez quote tweeted this and says, perhaps, right? Perhaps I did a pretty good job back in 2021. And then when Lando went on to win, Perez tweeted out, bravo, Lando, you and all of McLaren, congratulations, well deserved. So, you know, he was loving the downfall, I think, of Red Bull this season. And we'll discuss more in the coming minutes, additional changes they are making and just the way that Red Bull feels very different to how it used to under Horner, and certainly if Horner is gone and Marko is gone, that is going to be a very different organisation, and we'll get into why and how in a second. Another big confirmation that Lando Norris will be taking the number 1 on his car next year. I think we could have predicted this. It's in modern times when the drivers get to choose. It's only Hamilton in 2014 who said no, preferred to keep 44. But apart from that, you know, Max took it in 2022. Obviously, Rosberg retired before he got the chance. But Lando will be using number 1, so it will be LN1 on the car next season. We'll see if he can give it a good go to try and defend his title. But of course, things will change a lot. And I think it's just worth talking about. We have a new world champion. These are the world champions in the 21st century. Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button, Sebastian Vettel, Nico Rosberg, Max Verstappen, and now Lando Norris. And there'll be big questions here, right? People are obviously going to say, weakest champion ever, weakest champion of this century, or whatever you want to say. Now, look, I think it'll be worth judging Norris when we look back on his career rather than to do so now. But I think it was a fascinating season, and I wonder how this title will age. I know that Lando's got a lot of hate, a lot of frustration from some of the fans over this whole season, really over the last day or so, especially after taking the championship. Many feel that Piastri, maybe, you know, some feel like Piastri deserved it more, but I think there's a general feeling that McLaren, the papaya rules, the way that they were manipulating things, some of that definitely benefited Norris on occasion. Now, look, when you take into account the engine failure, the disqualifications, if you look at, in my opinion, if you look at the season on the whole, Lando was the more complete and better driver than Piastri over the season. So of the two, I think Piastri would have deserved it as well. But you look at the whole season, Lando definitely definitely deserved the championship. It's also worth keeping in mind that for many years, Norris was considered like, wow, this kid's so talented. Like 2021, he was having amazing seasons in the McLaren, doing things, destroying his teammates, the likes of Daniel Ricciardo, just putting him in the dust, and people were gassing up Norris heavily. This season, he finally gets a championship-winning car. Last season to an extent as well, but that was only really the end of the year, and I don't think Max was ever really going to yield the championship lead that he had last season. And then this year, Lando gets a car which is championship winning, but he's not so comfortable with. Piastri does a great job at the start of the season, and now apparently Norris is just terrible. Right? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. For years, people have been gassing up Norris, saying, oh, super underrated, and now apparently he's like awful driver or something. So I don't understand that. And I do think that when we look back at this championship in the coming years, there's a few things to say. Firstly, pretty much every driver on this list, their first title was a serious challenge, right? Like, getting it over the line has always been a problem for first champions. And look, Lando's in his 7th season. It was the same season that Max got his title. And look, let's not forget what happened at the end of 2021. Yeah, there was a load of drama off the track as well. And yes, Max put in that stellar lap in Saudi Arabia, but then he messed it up at the final corner. Let's not forget Abu Dhabi 2021. Forget what happened at the end of the Grand Prix. Max, in qualifying, messed up his run in Q2. He locked up on the medium tyres, so he had to do a run on softs, starting on the softs, which is not the optimal strategy. And then he got a bad start on the softs, and Hamilton overtook him on the mediums. Then, of course, the rest from there is history. But the point is that over the last few weekends, yeah, Lando's not been absolutely at his A+ game as he was in Mexico and Brazil. But how many mistakes did Norris make yesterday? Like, to me, that was a drive of a champion under immense pressure. He needed to get third based on what was happening on track and behind him, with the undercut from Charles Leclerc and all this. The best he could hope to get was third. And Lando, very decisive on his run through the field, executed as well as he needed to over the last couple of weekends. So, and there was certainly Grand Prix earlier in the season where he was absolutely driving like a champion. So I think that Norris getting it over the line, a lot of drivers on this list struggled with that on their first occasion, as we very well know. And I wonder what it means for Lando going forwards. Will he now be more free, right? Will he be even better, even stronger going forwards? Because the monkey's off his back, as it were, and the pressure that we know he has suffered with is to some extent gone. Or is he going to be like, oh, well, I've achieved that now, and then we look back on this list in 30 years and we say, well, Norris really wasn't all that special, right? It's difficult to judge the one-time champions, but I think it's worth giving them a few years before you judge what their career has turned into and what it really looks like, especially because in hindsight, when we look back on this championship in 10, 20 years, we will think about it in his battle with Max Verstappen, right? Oscar Piastri was absolutely a factor, but if this title was simply a battle between Norris and Piastri, and it was only ever the two McLarens that were ever going to win, and they were taking points off one another, and Norris won marginally over Piastri, and there was all the talk about favouritism and papaya rules and all this, then I think Norris's title would be diminished in its quality. But the fact that whatever you want to say about Max Verstappen's car, Verstappen is undisputably the best driver that we have in Formula 1 at the moment, one of the greatest drivers that we've ever seen in F1 in his prime. Verstappen even said by his own volition he thinks this was his best season that he has ever had. And whatever you want to say about the car performances, we are in the final year of the regulations. The car performances are closer than they have really ever been. And Norris did beat Verstappen, a prime Verstappen, to the title. And whatever you want to say about the connotations of that and the asterisks or whatever, I think in however many years' time, we'll look back on this title and probably give Norris a bit more credit than he is currently getting. That's my opinion. As ever, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. And look, I was critical of Lando's mentality earlier in the season, and I think justifiably so. And he's not changed his persona, his character, his personality, the way that he wants to go racing, but he has become a better version of himself, I think. And that's what's helped him. He gave a few very interesting comments. I would encourage you to seek out some of the interviews that Lando gave post-World Championship. I think it gives you a good insight into his personality, what this means to him as well. And he says, right, look, I've won this championship by doing it my way. I've tried to be honest. I've tried to be fair. I could have been more aggressive. I could have come off the brakes and knocked people out of the race, but that wasn't me. That's not what I planned to do. And the full quote that followed up was this: if you compare me to the other champions, have I been as aggressive as them at times? No. Have I been as daring at times? No. But did I do what I needed to do to win? Did I perform consistently? Did I perform what I needed to under the most pressure? Post Zandvoort, did I come back in the way that I had to? Did I have 3-4 weekends of great results? I did. And I performed what I needed to perform to win the World Championship. I did what I needed to do. I learned from everything. Like Montreal, I embarrassed myself. I wish I could go back and change some things. But I feel like I'm a better driver now, certainly, than I was at the beginning of the season. I think what impressed me about Lando as well the last few rounds was he was pretty resilient to the pressure, all things considered. As I say, compared to some of the other champions that we've mentioned, I think Lando did a pretty good job in getting this one over the line, to be honest, for his first World Championship. But he was also very much a perfectionist, struck me towards the end of the season. He's really tuned into, okay, where was I losing a little bit of time? Like, I wanted to win, I wanted to get better. And I think Norris is quite extrinsically motivated. A lot of his discussions after the championship were like, look, he wants to win for himself to a degree, but he wants to win far more for the people that support him, his family, his team, and all of that. And of course, the other champions want that as well. But, you know, I would say the majority of champions we looked at on that list are far more intrinsically motivated. They want to win for themselves. They want to be the best. That's not how Lando is naturally, but it doesn't mean that he still can't win for the right reasons, as it were. So I think it's fascinating. I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts on it anyway. I'm sure that I'll have more thoughts on the championship in the coming days. What I find fascinating is what it means to McLaren now, because look, Lando dominated Piastri in qualifying last year, 20-4, dominated him in the season as well. This year, it was far closer. Qualifying was far closer, 13-11. Next season, who knows? Will Piastri get even better? Will Norris be even better as a result? Or will he take his foot off the gas? Or McLaren even be competitive? And what will McLaren feel about it, right? There were certainly plenty of people at McLaren that wanted Lando to win over Oscar this year. Did that result in sabotage, as some of the suggestions were? No. Was there some level of favoritism? Possibly, depends on your perspective, but maybe next year doesn't matter. I also think to some degree Lando deserved to be the team's favourite in a way, just because he joined these guys like 7 years ago when McLaren were nowhere. Like, if you'd have told many when McLaren were in the depths of hell as they were when Lando joined, and even at the start of these regulations in 2022 where they were at the back of the grid, double Q1 elimination or whatever it was in Bahrain, even Piastri's opening Grand Prix for them was an absolute nightmare as well in 2023. To commit to the team in the way that he has done with all the questions, you know, Red Bull wanted Lando, right? They wanted him to partner Max. He said, no, I believe that we can do it at McLaren. And he's been a key part of building that team and building that car to a point where it's championship capable. So I think there's two sides to a story, of course, but I wonder what it means for Oscar. Because Oscar now says, well, look, he's not Superman. He's still Lando Norris. I still had the better of him for a good chunk of the season before his own collapse. I also think Piastri, just another conversation on this, I think Piastri's season, in hindsight, will be overlooked in terms of how bad it was from a period onwards, right? Because when we look back on this championship, we will talk about Norris versus Verstappen probably, whereas Piastri led this championship for the majority of the season, and then, you know, his big collapse at the end of the year would be a bigger talking point if it wasn't for Max, as we know, being so relevant. But anyway, we're talking a lot today. Piastri says Norris isn't magically Superman, they're not going to treat him any different, and Will Buxton, though, does argue, and I get this for sure, the way that Piastri and his team, Mark Webber, will feel about this. Will they think that this championship has been fair? Certainly next year, will Piastri be keen to stay for the long term? Because, of course, Lando and Piastri, they will say publicly, like, oh yeah, you know, great teammate, it's going to continue this way, but I don't know if I can see it happening for too much longer. So we'll get to the Red Bull stuff in a second. I want to say a couple of quick words on Ferrari. This is one, actually, a lovely overtake here from Hamilton at a place where you never really see an overtake, usually on Carlos Sainz at the start of yesterday's Grand Prix. Hamilton, though, says, look, you're not going to be able to talk to me this winter. I'm going to throw my phone in the bin, unplug from the Matrix, he said, and looking forward to that over the winter break. So lots of talk about Ferrari. The reality is, say what you want about Hamilton, Leclerc, the drivers, the car was atrocious. Leclerc was furious that they were 400 points behind McLaren at the end of the season. And Leclerc says the following: it's a big change, a huge opportunity to show what Ferrari is capable of. It is now or never, says Charles Leclerc. And I think that's relatively clear in terms of what he means there. It's like, look, Ferrari, you deliver a car or I'm out of here, right? Whatever you want to say about Hamilton, He's had his championships, he's had his success. Leclerc most certainly hasn't. That's why there will be big questions, especially about his future. But let's talk about the drama at Red Bull Racing. As I say, Max concluded by, look, of course he will think about, what could have been? Could I have won the fifth? But I think Max was incredibly magnanimous in defeat. I was really impressed by the way that Max has matured over these last few years, on and off the track. Like, yeah, you still get the Max Verstappen moments in Spain, right? Like, that's probably always going to be, to a certain degree, part of the package. We've seen it in Budapest and other Grand Prix before as well. But on the whole, Max says, was this my best year? Yes, I think so. I've hated this car at times. I've loved it at other times. I've got a better feeling now than I did this time last year because we had a better back half of the season, whereas last year was a struggle, as we know, towards the end of the year. But things are changing a lot at Red Bull Racing, and they have been for some time. Ever since the death of Dietrich Mateschitz, the top boss, things started to change. There was a big power struggle behind the scenes. The Austrian owners, Oliver Mintzlaff, the kind of top guy really, among others, Dietrich Mateschitz' son as well. And you've got all of that going on. You had Christian Horner fighting for his own control. He potentially wanted to even take Red Bull Racing out of the Red Bull umbrella, have it as its own organisation. There were all these rumours. Of course, a lot of that stuff is unsubstantiated. But this guy in the background, Helmut Marko, he has been there from day one. Effectively, Dietrich Mateschitz' right-hand man, the head of the Red Bull Junior Academy. And say what you want about Helmut Marko, basically half the grids owe their careers, at least to some degree, to this man. So, look, he's a very important character, a controversial character at that, but in this man's place, Laurent Marquis used to stand Christian Horner. Now, Horner and Marko, at times were probably pretty good friends. At times they didn't necessarily see eye to eye, but Marko was Mateschitz's man, as it were, and also Austrian, had very good connections with the Austrian side of the business. Horner did not, was more so with the Thai side. We talked a lot about that civil war over the last couple of years. We'll get back to Marko in a second, because the key rumour immediately after the race was precisely why GP was so emotional right after the fact. Obviously was a massive challenge, but it was becoming pretty clear for the last few laps that Max wasn't going to win, right? So to see GP in tears in the way that he was, yeah, very emotional. The Helmut Marko piece is definitely a talking point, but there's some talk about whether Gianpiero Lambiase will stay in that role, because we know he missed a couple of Grand Prix this season, and rumour has it he was also set to miss Qatar, but he didn't because the championship challenge was potentially on. So he chose to travel anyway. Now, of course, it's not our place to really speculate what this might involve. We can only presume that personal circumstances, family or otherwise, for GP mean that his ability to travel to 24 Grand Prix a season alongside Max is far more of a challenge now than it has been for some time. So, wishing only the best for him, of course. It's not like they're going to get rid of him or he's going to leave precisely. The rumour was that they might move GP to a different role, a more senior role in the team, where maybe he can work more remotely, right, than he currently is, going to all the Grand Prix. That's not yet been finalised. Eric Van Haren, very close with the guys in the Verstappen camp, effectively. He was asked on it, and Eric says, not that I am aware of. So the GP rumours, we shall see, again, if the circumstances change before the new season. Hopefully the GP and Max relationship will continue, because it wouldn't feel right, would it, to have someone else on the radio with Max Verstappen other than this man on the left-hand side. So could be moved to a more senior role, could be another race engineer getting finalised. That's one of the big rumours of the day. But this is Helmut Marko, right? And after all the drama of the last few months, Horner gets sacked. It looks like Marko has effectively won the civil war, but it's not as clear-cut as that, because Marko was always Mateschitz's man, not necessarily Oliver Mintzlaff's man, who is now effectively the guy that is calling the shots. But let's not forget, Max Verstappen, Jos Verstappen, much more aligned with the Helmut Marko side of things than the Christian Horner side of things. Horner got sacked. The team has improved, for sure, in terms of their on-track performances, but Laurent Marquis will tell you that actually that was coming anyway. Lots of the upgrades were done under Horner's direction. they were committing very hard indeed regardless. What I can say for sure, just even from a feel perspective as well, is that Red Bull have changed, right? They used to have this like Marko, Horner, Verstappen kind of attitude and aura, as it were, around the team. If there was a rule, they would find a way to bend or to break it, right? And that's just the way that Red Bull operated, and it was very on brand, actually. It was very on brand for Red Bull. Like, they break the cost cap in 2021, they get fined, it's all the reactionary repercussions, right? Like, if Mercedes do that, it's terrible for their brand image, but if Red Bull do it, it's kind of on brand and it works. And it works with the Horner, Marko, Verstappen dynamics. When you've got Horner says one thing to the media, Marko says another, then there's some sort of drama they've got to do the damage control. Just highly entertaining. And Marko's been a key part of that for a long time. And there's no doubt things have changed, because yesterday's Grand Prix, yes, we did see some Red Bull shenanigans, right? Like Yuki tried to stop Lando Norris overtaking him, tried reasonably hard, got a penalty in the process. But I'm convinced if Horner was still in charge, even as this tweet says, if Horner was in charge, he would have had screenshots, he would have had telemetry, he would have printed things out, he would have gone to the FIA, right? Like, that's just how things would have been. He probably would have had more of a stern talking to with Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar before the race to see if they could do something as well. Now, say about that what you will, but Horner, it was a different organisation to Horner. It felt more ruthless. The fact that Max was just... I know that Max couldn't really do anything else, but... like, there's no way under Horner that would have happened, I think, in exactly the same way, right? This time round, they would have done the extra pit stop or something, Red Bull, to try and back up the pack. They would have done something, I think, different under Horner. The organisation has changed, and you might argue for the better, but it's definitely different, right? There was also this to mention, because Max lost the title by 2 points. Kimi Antonelli, because of his mistake in Qatar, gave Lando 2 more points. The reality is it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because Piastri would have dropped back to 3rd and Lando would have won the title. It is what it is, but it was obviously unfortunate. Now, there were a lot of abuse sent the way of Antonelli, and some of that was riled up by Helmut Marko, who immediately after the race said that Antonelli led him through, and then he had to publicly apologise for that, and apparently this is being used as one of the reasons to get rid of him. Now, again, I think this is probably a straw that broke the camel's back thing, or just finding an excuse for what Red Bull want to do anyway. But according to the Telegraph, Helmut Marko is set to leave Red Bull. Now, look, he's 82. He's been around an incredibly long time. People have said for some time, like, Helmut, just retire, right? Call it a day. Thing is, that people like Helmut Marko, he loves this. He lives to work, and I don't think he would be happy if he was just retiring, kicking his feet up. And I don't think that's what it keeps him going, doing what he does, as controversial as he is. So I don't think he wants to step away precisely, but we'll see what the implications are in a second. Marko, immediately after the race, because he was asked about this, said, his future's not in doubt. I will have a discussion. It's a complex set of things. I have to sleep over it, and then we will see. Paddock sources said decision has been made. Marko will be leaving. Now, it wasn't long ago that Max Verstappen said that effectively Marko and that side are an important pillar, and if Marko was to go, I would go as well. He was very important to Max Verstappen. So if he's to leave, things will be different. For sure. I mean, they already are. Builds.de say Marko officially is leaving at his own request, but Build knows that that's only half the story. Red Bull management has been wanting a complete restart for some time now. Leading the charge is Mintzlaff, who we have mentioned many a time. So, it's very interesting. Marko says it's a decision that I will make personally, but again, it depends on the relationship, the dynamics there, whether Marko would be, still allowed to have any level of power. Probably this was coming, right? I mean, they had that Red Bull civil war. It was pitched as Horner versus Marko. Marko seemingly won on some level, but is in a massive shock that when these kind of wars happen, both parties end up falling foul of something. And yeah, Red Bull are changing, right? Like, Marko has been a very important figure in F1 for a long time. If he does leave Red Bull and Christian Horner is gone as well, I will say it feels at that point only a matter of time until Max departs too. I'll just put it that way, right? because that was such a trifecta in a way, controversial as they were. And Red Bull are moving to Red Bull powertrains next year. There's not an awful lot of optimism about their power units, the Ford piece of the puzzle as well. If the car isn't good next year, Max will be looking for alternatives, and within reason, he will have no real good reason to stay. So that's the key rumour as it stands, that Marko's gone. What does it mean for Max? Very good question. He will start next season with Red Bull Racing. He will be a driver there for at least another year. He was asked as well, with Lando Norris standing in the background, what number will he use? Is he going to go back to 33? He says probably not. So he's talked about using 69. He's talked about hopefully using number 3, I think is the number that he wants, but it's still technically Daniel Ricciardo's for another year. So he may have to do some sort of a deal with regard to that. But yeah, just interesting timing to all of this, because the Grand Prix was over last night. And guess who was spotted speaking with Max Verstappen but Toto Wolff? So Verstappen had slunk his way over, that's even a word, to the Mercedes hospitality and caught a few words about, well, who knows, right, obviously, and it's not for speculation today. But intrigued your thoughts in the comments. Long video today. Appreciate you all bearing with me, and hopefully you've enjoyed the content this season. Next season is not far away. We are roughly 48, 49 days away from the cars hitting the track in Barcelona at the end of January for the first test. These are some concept front wings coming out of Cadillac that they've revealed as to what they're looking like. Of course, they wouldn't reveal anything that was going to give too much away, but thought that was pretty interesting to look at regardless. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.